What is up, everybody? Travis Big League Berardi coming to you from OH Report headquarters east in Massillon, Ohio, with the first edition of the 2025 football area stat leaders, the top 10 passing, rushing, and receiving leaders from our conferences and our teams that we cover here in North Central Ohio. And this year, brought to you by Pinnacle Building Services. If you need any cleaning jobs done in your professional building, we'll just call them. They'll do that for you in a jiffy. As always, this is the time to shine for these players in North Central Ohio to help their teams make the playoffs, like Cale Lewis and Hillsdale last year, make the state championship game. For a guy like maybe a Braden DeVito, some revenge, a chance to get to where they wanted to be last year despite falling to Ontario. They want more. There are some players that want more. There are some players that you never heard about that are going to be in this top 10 coming up, but the first time for these players to make their mark on the area leaders. And without further ado, let's just get right into things and take a look at the passing leaders for week number 4. We'll start out down at number 10. Andon Klaus of Mohawk, a tough loss to Colonel Crawford on Friday night, 24-21, but he has been showing out 620 passing yards, 6 touchdowns as well. Welcome to the lineup for the first time, Marcus Hoflich of Clear Fork. The Colts are rolling along right now. They're one of those sneaky teams in the Mid-Ohio Athletic Conference. He's in at number 9 with 628 passing yards, 39 completions, 5 touchdowns. Aiden Schmidt put up one heck of an effort for the Galleon Tigers on Friday night at Shelby. They had the lead, but the Whippets just too much in the end, pulling off the victory. But it shows the Galleon, maybe this year's Ontario squad, that went right toe-to-toe with Shelby, ended up beating them in the playoffs. And, if they play like they do so far, they may meet again. We all want that matchup to happen, right? I mean, come on, Galleon, Shelby once again. But hey, Clear Fork may have something to say about that. A couple other teams, Ontario, like I said, too. So we'll have to find out as we move on. But Aiden Schmidt so far doing very, very good. At number 7, Jake Rothauer, 647 yards passing, just 10 ahead of Schmidt. 40 completions for 5 touchdowns. It seems like Willard constantly producing quarterbacks year in and year out, and Jake now the newest one here for the Flashes. West Holmes, one of the 3 teams I think will compete for an OCC championship this year, with the likes of Ashland, with the likes of Lexington as well, and Braden Parsons, one of the reasons why. 718 passing yards, 46 completions, 8 touchdowns for him. I spoke about Cale Lewis and the Hillsdale Falcons a little bit ago. Well, he has his team at 4-0 as expected, state ranked in the top 5 as expected, and he's thrown for 735 yards, 47 completions, 11 total touchdowns, kind of like what we saw last year with AJ Bauer, where he's done this mostly in the first halves. They've had some running clocks already this season, and he's still almost up to 1,000 yards. They got a big one coming up Friday night at Dalton, and then they get Smithville, who just knocked off Dalton and is still undefeated at home in 2 weeks. Number 4, another player that we think will take his team far in the playoffs, unless the team like Galleon has something to say about that. That is Braden DeVito, the D1 commit, 786 passing yards. You may see him in the rushing leaders as well. He can run it, he can pass it. He's shown off so far. The Whippets are number 1 in the state in Division 4 because of him and a couple other big players. 56 completions, 10 total touchdowns for him. Now to our top 3, and a player from a St. Paul squad that, hey, at first you thought, well, don't know what's going to happen. They started off 0-2, but Grant Coonley, the junior quarterback, 55 completions, 6 touchdowns, 840 yards, kind of like what we saw last year. Despite the injuries early on, St. Paul made a run once they got into Firelands Conference play. Well, they had 2 losses this year in non-conference, but they have really bounced back with a vengeance, and Grant Coonley has them positioned back in D7. 840 on the passing yards, 55 completions, 6 total touchdowns for him. Now to the number 2 player who got his team off the schneid on Friday night against Loudonville. Jax Lester throwing for 228 in the victory. Well, he has 862 total yards, 70 completions, 11 tutties. He's averaging just over 12 yards per completion. You know, a tough 1-point loss in week 1, and 2 very tough Northern 10 teams in Winford and Colonel Crawford. They were right with Crawford. 14-12 at the half. Crawford pulled away because Crawford is a very good squad. So I believe are the East Knox Bulldogs. They're 1-0 in the KMAC after this victory over the Redbirds, in which Jax Lester just picked apart the Loudonville defense. And if he continues to do that, the Bulldogs still got that shot at a postseason appearance. Our top passer, though, Chase Smith, the quarterback from River Valley, hasn't played since, I believe it was grade school, from what I've heard from our own OH Report crew. He's in the lead right now, though. He is tossing the pigskin up and down the field. 867 total yards, 63 completions, and 8 touchdowns. That is 13.76 yards per completion. River Valley going in with some big victories early on. 2-2 so far. However, 1-0 in the MOAC, and maybe they are a spoiler as well here for the River Valley Vikings, looking to get to the postseason again behind a first-year quarterback in the varsity ranks, but he is playing like he has been throwing the pigskin for the last few years. So there are your top 10 passers. Some, like I said, new faces to the lineup. Some familiar faces that took their teams deep in the postseason last year and want to do it again. I'm looking at you, Mr. DeVito. I'm looking at you, Mr. Lewis, especially. But we're going to see some new names as well. It was very jumbled between 10 and 15, and it's still, you know, very jumbled. 620 yards to 867. You could go off. Andon Klaus could go off for 400 yards next week and jump up to about 4th. That's what makes things so great, especially early on. Then you'll have those guys that pull away. But these quarterbacks get these numbers. You want to know why? Because they throw it to their receivers. And let's take a look now at the receiving leaders. Once again, brought to you by Pinnacle Building Services. And we start, once again, down at the bottom at number 10, Logan DeMoss of the Calvert Senecas. 244 receiving yards. On 10 catches, 24.4 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns for him. Mohawk has a big play receiver, Levi Tile. 259 receiving yards, 8 catches. He's averaging 32.3 yards per catch, 2 touchdowns. Talk about your big play receiver. He is right there with Mohawk. At number 8, Eli Snyder. We have the number 1 passing quarterback in Smith. Well, he has to throw it to somebody, and Eli Snyder once again in the top 10, just like last year. He is at 272 receiving yards on 21 catches and a touchdown. Jax Lester was number 2 quarterback. He has a guy in Logan Clark who showed off on the OH Report against Loudonville. He has 276 yards receiving, just ahead of Snyder. 15 catches, 18.73 yards per catch, and 4 touchdowns. Our number 6 receiver did most of this damage in week 1. It is Hayden Love. He went off for 4 touchdowns, all of his 4 touchdowns, and almost all of his 288 receiving yards there. He has 10 catches, average of 28.8 yards per catch. He did that in week 1, but that shows he is one of those big play receivers. If they need to go to him, he can make the big play. But Centerburg's such a balanced squad. We'll tell you why when we show our rushing leaders as well. But it just balances things out for these Trojans. They did have a tough loss against Johnstown, but Johnstown is a solid squad there. If they can continue to spread it around, I believe Mr. Clark, or Mr. Love, I should say, will stay in this top 10. Now to number 5, St. Paul, Connor Lindenberger, 693 total yards so far on 15 catches, 19 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns, as St. Paul has things turned around and are on the right side of things. To number 4, a player we saw show off week 2 against Seneca East, Connor Stockdale. Not only did he have that pick 6, but he had a couple huge plays. The speedy receiver for the Golden Knights of Northland were already over 300 yards. 21 catches, 14.75 yards per catch, and 4 touchdowns. Now to number 3. You think Crawford, they're a running team, right? They'll just run down your throat. They're in the Northern 10. No, they can pass and receive too, thanks to the play of one Parker Weithman. 400 yards on the dot. He's averaging 100 yards per game. Yeah, my math. I can math. 18 catches, 6 total touchdowns as the Colonel Crawford Eagles, another one of those teams that we saw last year, so close against Grandview Heights. Could have had that matchup with Northmore for a regional championship, but they have that chip on their shoulder. They have most of everybody back, and they have shown off so far. He came up big in their win over Mohawk on the road, state-ranked squads, possibly for the Northern 10 championship already, and Mr. Weithman showed out in their victory. They're state-ranked, and they are still undefeated at 4-0. Now to number 2, Paxton Flores. He is the receiver for one Jake Rothauer. Again, we had Willard quarterbacks be our passing champions. We have Willard wide receivers finish in the top 3 in wide receiver yardage here on the receiving leaders. And, well, Paxton doing it once again. 420 yards, 20 catches, 21 yards per catch, and 3 tutties for the Crimson Flashes. And, well, welcome back to the top once again, Mr. Brady Bowman of the Shelby Whippets. The kid just continues to catch the ball in big times. He went off against rival Bellevue. You know, Bellevue got the best of Shelby the last couple times they played. Not this time because of Mr. Bowman. And also making some big plays in their win over Gallion between the number 1 and number 8 teams in the state. Brady Bowman has done phenomenal. 487 yards, 26 catches, and 7 touchdowns already for the Shelby Whippet Senior as the number 1 team in Division 4, looking to do great things on the field the rest of the way. They're 4-0, and they are rolling. Before we get to our rushing top 10, it is time to shout out our sponsor, Pinnacle Building Services, with this ad. Please, stay tuned and watch.
I didn't think our staff would even notice that we switched cleaning companies, but they did right away. They noticed that the office was cleaner, that things were bright, more vibrant, and that created a more positive working environment for us. There's always a potential to spread illness if our building isn't as clean as it possibly could be. Having Pinnacle in our building to make sure that it's as clean and safe and healthy as it can be helps us take the best care of our patients. It's family owned and operated, they're local, which means a lot to us.
Thank you, Pinnacle Building Services, for keeping our businesses clean in North Central Ohio and sponsoring this Stat Leaders segment today. So, we had our passers, we had our receivers. It is time for the bell cows, the ones that run the ball, because North Central Ohio is known for our rushing. Let's take a look at the first edition of the rushing leaders through week 4, and we'll start off at Centerburg's number 10, Miles Marshall. You think Marshall all the way at 10? Well, he really didn't do much until Friday night when he went off against the Northmore Golden Knights, and it was about this time last year when he really broke through and broke into our top 10. Well, he has 438 rushing yards on 58 carries, almost 8 yards per carry, but he has 8 total touchdowns for the Centerburg Trojans. And like I said, this is a team that they have so much balance this season and can do pretty much anything they want. They can pass the ball, they can run the ball. As you can see, Miles Marshall looking once again to doing some good things for the Centerburg Trojans, who sit at 3-1 and 1-0 in the K-MAC. Now to number 9, Andon Klaus. Yeah, once again, the quarterback, our first multi-aspect quarterback, dual threat quarterback here. He has 447 yards rushing, 69 carries, 6.48 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns for the Warriors, who should still be state ranked after that close loss to Colonel Crawford. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard. Maybe 1 or 2 more fights for Mohawk, but they should finish, I think, 8-9 wins in regular season and a very high seed in the postseason, maybe even a bye, since now we have bye weeks in the playoffs. Another dual threat quarterback, Jake Rothauer. Jake with 454 rushing yards, 74 carries, 6.14 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns for the Willard Crimson Flash. Monroeville, you've seen him on the OH Report. Connor Boris, 458 rushing yards on 115 carries. The running back for the Eagles, flying through the defense, almost 8.5 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns. DeVito also, so there we go, 9, 8, and 6. All dual threat quarterbacks, also number 5 too when we get to him. But Braden DeVito, 459 yards rushing, 45 carries, 10 touchdowns, over 10 yards per carry. He almost had 150 on the ground against Gallion, and he needed all of it as he went for 5 total touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns for him on the season. Braden DeVito going off. Talked about another dual threat quarterback that's undefeated under head coach Scott Spittler in his first year at Fredericktown. That's Blake Sipes, 461 rushing yards on 58 carries, over almost 8 yards per carry, and 6 total touchdowns. Now to the youngin' from the Danville Blue Devils. That is Cy Wallace. Cy already over half 1,000 yards through 4 games, 529 to be exact, on 68 carries, almost 8 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns for the Danville Blue Devil. They got a big one coming up Friday night. You'll see it live and free on the OH Report on the new turf at Tough Street Stadium as they take on Northmore. Danville right now 2-2, 0-1 in the conference after a tough loss to Mount Gilead, but that's a big Mount Gilead squad. Maybe their running back's at the top. You already saw it. Yes, he is, but that is what we see from Danville. I don't see them losing too many more games. I see them making the playoffs, and one of the reasons why, Mr. Cy Wallace. Now to the top 3. From Western Reserve, who was 4-1 on the season, Landon Weigel, the junior running back, 584 yards on 70 carries and 10 total touchdowns for him. Another name that we've seen towards the top or at the top of this list the last couple of years, he's back at Cardington. Wyatt Denny with a big returning offensive line as well. 712 yards rushing on 112 carries, 6.3 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. But at the top, in week 1 of the stat leaders through week 4 of the regular season, Carson Barnum of the Mount Gilead Indians. 738 yards rushing on 115 carries, 6.4 yards per carry, and 5 touchdowns. The Indians not putting up a ton of points, but they don't need to. They have that rushing attack that I saw took 12 minutes off the clock in a game they nearly beat Northmore with that ended in a score. This game you see the highlights of, they won 7-6, but with that line on the offense and defense, with the running of Carson Barnum, he is like a bowling ball. Mount Gilead 4-0 for the first time in quite some time, maybe ever, from what I heard. It's going to take us a while to just look back into the record books to see the last time that Mount Gilead has been undefeated this late in the season, but it's great to see. Good from Coach Mike Reed's squad, and Mr. Barnum, one of the reasons why. So there you go. The first edition of the Area Stat Leaders brought to you by the fine folks at Pinnacle Building Services. If your business needs cleaning, they are the ones that do it. It'll be spot-free, just like the holes that Mount Gilead make for Mr. Barnum on the rushing side. Just nice and clean, nice and clear, spot-free. But that'll do it. We'll be back next week. We'll see if Mr. Barnum, if Mr. Smith, and Mr. Bowman can keep their leads, can extend their leads, or will somebody overtake them? But we'll find out then. But for now, I am Big League Berardi saying so long